Hello, everybody. This is Ben from Benbegone.com. We're going to go ahead and start our second official podcast today. And with me today, I have a good friend of mine who I've been getting to know over the course of just about a year now. And we're going to be hitting on the topic of comedy today. So why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, everyone at benbegone.com. I'm Adam Baxt. I'm in the improv troupe here at USF, the University of South Florida. I've been looking into and following comedy for some time now, and I think it's, in my opinion, the best art form.
Yeah.
So I am
All
very
right.
pleased to be here with you today, Benjamin, and I'm glad we're going to be talking about comedy.
Yeah, of course. So let's go ahead and you mentioned it a little bit there when you first started off. But
Yeah.
let's go ahead and I just want curious, what's your background with comedy? Obviously, you do improv with me.
With, like, me personally, comedy I've done,
Or comedy you're interested in, so to speak.
I'm interested in actually every single type of comedy.
Right.
I've been trying to write a little bit recently. A lot of improv. I love improv. Probably the purest form of comedy is improv. Been, going to some open mics, watching some people, just really getting into it. Watching just different comedy shows and different comedy movies that I've gotten suggestions from, and being in improv, people will be like, oh, you gotta watch this, you gotta see this, listen to this special, watch this show. So I've just been kind of taking it all in, and I've been interested in comedy. This is my second semester, a freshman at USF, and I've been into comedy since probably sixth grade, like heavily into it.
Really?
So I've been looking into it for, this would be 8 years, I guess. It's not that. I mean, it's whatever. I just really like looking into the different forms, and I've written so far. I've written 3 papers on comedy.
Wow.
Including a speech on Tig Notaro, the great female comedian.
Sure.
We don't need to specify female comedians, right? They're comedians.
Yeah, sure. So,
Okay.
As far as in regards to your background in comedy,
Okay.
are there any specific comedians that you would say that have had a pretty significant impact on your understanding of what comedy is or what it could be?
Absolutely. In different fields too.
Sure.
Well, you have stand-up, the king of stand-up, George Carlin.
Yeah.
You're probably not even listening to this podcast right now if you don't know who George Carlin is. If you see, podcast comedy, but it's almost like a given anyone's going to say George Carlin, because he really explored the realms of just what it could do, and he switched styles going into his career, so he was more of like a hokey kind of nightclubby guy, and then he started hitting hard issues. So stand-up comedy has to be George Carlin, and then there's so many more. I mean, Milton Berle, classic, starting up in nightclubs. I mean, Don Rickles is a personal favorite, but that what's really interesting with him is that he mixes kind of improv with stand-up, because he's an insult comic. Okay. So as an insult comic, you don't really know who's going to be in the crowd.
Sure.
I mean, unless you're performing for like a select group of people that are going to be there. And most of the time, he was a nightclub comedian. So stand-up, I can go on and on. I'm sure we will. I'm sure we'll get to stand-up and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah. Most definitely.
But so for, say, writing comedy, television shows or movies, I mean, Arrested Development. Without that, I don't think I would ever be doing comedy, really, or getting into it, because Arrested Development really showed it mixed such good writing with such unique comedic stylings from the actors. I mean, Jeffrey Tambor, Tony Hale, they're just such good characters, and the writing is so good because it combines callbacks and flash forwards, flashbacks. So for writing, has to be Arrested Development, and really just so many types of comedy you could do, improv, right? You have Thomas Middleditch, Ben Schwartz, they're so good at it. You have Amy Poehler, and I'm sure we're gonna dive more. This is I'm taking this as more of an induction,
Yeah, for sure. Now we're just I was just hoping to hit on what you would consider to be important about comedy, and what would be what's the most meaningful thing comedy has been in regards to you and how it's inspired you and all that.
Okay.
But but we can hit on that in a little bit.
I just feel like I know there's so much to talk about with comedy.
Oh yeah.
So
it's a pretty
I don't
wide
want to get
subject.
off on a tangent right now
Sure.
about one certain thing when I'm following where this is a dance. Comedy is a dance too. A lot of times improv is what I like to call a dance because you have to help each other. You know.
Well, let's talk about that.
Talk about improv.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Because it's a subject you and I happen to know about
Yes.
pretty intimately, I would say. So just for a short background for anybody who may not know, Adam and I are in the improv club here at our school, and man, what an experience it has been.
Honestly.
I would say no other thing that I have done has taught me through experience just how to read people. In all honesty, I mean, you got to read what's happening. You have to pay attention, and it truly opened my eyes from comedy being such a cheap joke kind of thing, which is what I think is a fair thing to think if you don't know much about it. But really,
kind of just like passively watching comedy, yeah.
Or even if you don't pay attention to it, which really I'm pretty guilty of. I don't
really. Hopefully, I can change your mind.
Yeah, well, maybe, but over time, I just there was a point in my life where I was paying attention to, comedy and what directions it was taking and all that. But recently, no, I haven't been following it really. But improvs. So let's talk a little bit about that. So
Absolutely.
what's your take on improv? Do you
improv? I said it earlier in this podcast.
Pure.
It's the most pure.
Okay.
And it's the most. I would think I haven't tried all forms of comedy yet.
Sure.
I would
mean,
think
there's so many out there.
There's so many. I would think it's probably the most thrilling because you're out there with nothing, and you can listen to so many improvisers from UCB or Second City or whatever.
Sure.
They always kind of describe it as a war zone, right? And I think I was watching a interview with Amy Poehler, who helped start the Upright Citizens Brigade, and she was saying, it's like being in a war. You need to help each other out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because so for your listeners who might not know, there's several rules in improv that help the scenes move along.
Absolutely,
so you have agreeants, yes, and
yeah.
So you never want to negate someone.
Right. Cut somebody off.
Someone off, just like that I just did right there for you.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the first rule.
Right.
And then the second one is kind of listening.
Sure.
To what's happening.
Sure.
And then third, probably the most important one, is that it's a group activity. I mean, improv is kind of hard to do with yourself. You can have a monologuist, and that's fine. But when you have like a 20-minute show of long form, then you kind of have to have each other's back. I mean, even in duos, when it's two people,
right,
you're feeding off each other constantly, and you just keep going.
You have to think about what can you add to the scene, and potentially, and this is something I've been trying to get better at, is setting up things for other people too.
Yeah, serve your server.
Oh, absolutely. You got to be able to. And it all depends really with who you're doing it with and what their style is. We've been talking a little bit about this in the past, but man, different people have different styles about them, and I think this can extend to different forms of comedy as well.
Absolutely.
So
you have what's called game.
Yes.
Which would be kind of like, it's really like high energy, moving towards like the way I describe it is almost as like running jokes or like common gags you would see, which is hilarious when done well. I mean, anything in comedy is hilarious when it's done well.
Sure.
And that's admirable to watch.
Yeah.
That's the one kind of main style of improv, I feel. And then the other one is narrative, which I believe we kind of fall under.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I would say you and I follow that pretty closely.
And that's more story based, so it's like a kind of like a clear beginning, middle, end with a conflict and stuff.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying. Improv is so scary because you can't sit up there and be like, okay, here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna come in, we're gonna get in a fight, you're gonna solve the fight, and we're gonna be happy. That's gonna be the scene. It's you get up there and someone says, your suggestion is magic tricks, and you go off that, and it's just so thrilling and just it's scary. It's like going on a roller coaster.
Well,
and you can't see the track.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously you can't plan improv, or at least, I mean, you're not supposed to.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
you know, so it's not like you can stand on the sidelines and say, hey, you do this and I'll do this.
Right.
You can call people in, sure, but ultimately, I feel like it's more along the lines of reading what your partners in the scene are going to be doing, and how you can play off of that.
Everyone's the director, everyone's the producer, everyone's the actors, everyone's the writers, and we could be having a scene if we were doing an improv scene right now,
Sure.
and we're plumbers, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about doing plumbing, and all of a sudden, another one of our group members comes in and says, Godzilla's destroying the city.
Right.
Well, we might have thought, okay, we're plumbers, we're going to do some Mario Brothers thing or something,
Or
right?
something working off of plumbing.
That's where our minds went.
Sure.
And then one of our teammates is like, for some reason, plumbing inspired Godzilla, and now we're doing that. And that's just, you're constantly adapting, constantly changing, and that's honestly why I think improv is like the purest form, because it's comedy at its scariest. Is that, I don't know if that's the best way to describe it.
I think that would be a fair way to put it, just because, you can't read the minds of what the other people in the scene are doing, and you just have to kind of place some trust in them as far as to help you carry along the scene. I can't tell you how many scenes you and I have been in where things have gone completely off the rails, and it just and that would be an example, I think, of not paying attention. Maybe I don't know, maybe just a miscommunication between the people in the scene.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's such a wonderful experience, improv. I would say.
Absolutely.
It really is. But let's go ahead and transition a little bit to more of a type of comedy I think more people would be familiar with.
Okay.
And that would be stand-up.
All right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, I can tell we're going to be on this topic a little bit.
Probably.
So one thing, let's go ahead and start off with this. What elements do you think make up a good stand-up set, in your opinion?
Okay, that's a great question.
Sure.
For me, and comedy is kind of hard because it is, it's like eating food. Not everyone likes spaghetti. I love spaghetti. You know what I mean? So not everyone has the same taste. Is what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Okay.
It's a way easier way to say that. I don't know why I just did a whole runaround analogy. But
okay, I'll let it slide.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. But yeah, so obviously people have different tastes, but I think for the most part, we all can kind of tell that's good comedy. Like even me, I can be like, if I don't personally find it funny, I can admire that. That's pretty good. So for a good stand-up set for me, I would say like Mike Birbiglia, if anyone's familiar with him, has a really great way of panning out a set where essentially he has one large overarching story.
Yes.
So if you watch like My Girlfriend's Boyfriend or his new one, Thank God for Jokes, you kind of have like one big overarching story with different anecdotes relating, connecting to it, and that's to me is like a really creative way to do it. And I think it's really well done. It's a really good way to set up callbacks, references, and stuff like that. But not everyone kind of has that. So I would feel like a perfect stand-up set would be a mix between personal anecdotes and kind of just like general observations. So if we watch like John Mulaney, right? He has personal stories. He'll talk about times when he was a kid, times with his wife, but he'll also have, he'll sit there and be like, well, let's talk about Back to the Future, I think it's really funny, stuff like that. So you can stick to one comedy. There's not a problem with that. I mean, Mitch Hedberg, Dimitri Martin, they're all kind of one-liners, and that's great.
Sure.
They're great at what they do, and well, I guess Mitch, what he did. But for a great stand-up set, I mean, to get laughs, obviously, that's always a key goal. But I think if you can kind of deliver a personal message as well as a societal message, that's really good. Like that, in my idea, would be ideal. An ideal set would be a mix between those two.
I think something is lost a little bit when, this is going to be an example that might, split some people, but I, for example, don't enjoy typically the Kevin Hart.
Right. Okay.
And he kind of goes, I think he goes for more like cheap stuff, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Is that a fair thing to say?
Yeah, this is gonna split some hairs, I feel.
No, that's fine.
And that's what comedy's meant to do, really.
Sure.
Comedy is never supposed to be censored, in my opinion, ever.
Oh no, never. I don't think any sort of anything really.
And you can look back at Lenny Bruce being arrested for making like masturbation jokes, or the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. They always tried to censor them, and I just feel, in my personal opinion, comedy should never be censored.
Okay.
I mean, unless someone's coming out there and like making deliberate threats to people, and just saying, "Oh, I'm a comedian," I don't think it should ever be really canceled or
that's fair.
censored. Yeah. Now with Kevin Hart, I've had in-depth conversations with people about this, and it's funny because I admire him in terms of his rise. I'm not gonna sit here and say he didn't work hard.
Right.
He hasn't done anything like that. And if any comedian is known basically in like a household name almost, then I can't sit here and say they're not good.
Right.
Now, Kevin Hart, I just don't like his comedy. I feel like it is kind of easier. As someone who sits, this is going to sound like I'm really pretentious, and I don't mean to come off that way.
Sure.
But, if I sit here and watch all these different stand-up sets and all these great ways of delivering jokes and stuff, and, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't sit there and be like, oh, I'm going to watch Kevin Hart today. Mm-hmm. I could sit here and watch the same set from, like, John Mulaney. John Mulaney is my personal favorite comedian. Mm-hmm. That's still living, I guess you could say.
Sure.
I could sit here and watch, like, his sets numerous times. Hannibal Buress even, or Aziz Ansari is pretty good. Those are just way deeper, I would say, and I don't know. I would have to agree with what you're saying. Is what I'm trying to get at, I guess.
Sure. I don't know. It's just I feel like some forms of comedy, stand up. I mean, some there's a sect of stand up comedians, and I feel like they're. I don't know if appealing to the lowest denominator would be an appropriate way to call it, but. Just some of the content, I would say, like they go for some of the most, I'd say, childish and
I would
humor.
say,
you know what I'm saying?
I would say it's very for a passive listener. I would say, if I was willing to sit and really analyze comedy like I like to do, I wouldn't pop in. I wouldn't pop in like a Kevin Hart movie. I'm not trying to be rude to anyone involved in the production of those or anything like that.
I don't think we have a lot of Kevin Hart production.
Are they watching this right now? Are they listening to this?
Oh, well, they found us.
No, but, and I have no problem with, like, blue comedy is what it's called when it's kind of, like, raunchy, I guess. Because, like, I have a lot of admiration for the National Lampoon. I have a lot of, I think what they did was really good and kind of changed it. I mean, obviously, the older comedians, because really what happened with the way that comedy specifically kind of got started was back in the early days of vaudeville. So vaudeville, for anyone who doesn't know, is kind of like would be like jugglers, would be like singers. It'd be kind of almost. It would be like performers. If you think of like an old timey performer on like the Jersey Shore or like anywhere in. That's just kind of like a Charlie Chaplin would almost be vaudeville would be a good way to describe it. But this is early. This is early in the last century, and you would have those comedians where it would be kind of like universal to watch. Like a famous one would be like Eddie Cantor, right? He moved from vaudeville to radio, but he had the famous joke that went, my uncle died of neck pains. Yeah, they hung him, right? That's kind of like,
okay.
Oh, okay, ha ha ha.
Sure.
And that would be vaudeville.
Oh,
but you would have burlesque theaters, which would be way raunchier. And the term blue comedy, which would refer to raunchiness or, overall just kind of what they would label distasteful, came from, they would have their set and the manager would go up to them after the show, and if they had a joke that they felt was off-colored, they would give them a blue envelope with a joke inside saying, remove this from their act. So that's where blue comedy came from.
I see. Okay.
And
I didn't know that.
So just through evolutionary wise of comedy, because comedy, I mean, it's obviously been around for a while, but it really started with vaudeville, moved to radio, to nightclubs, and then so on and so forth, movies, TV shows, stuff like that.
Sure.
And with burlesque theaters, you could get away with. I mean, people were there to see half-dressed women.
Sure.
You know,
or whatever.
They didn't care about a joke about your wife's vagina. Like, they didn't care. They just and that's kind of what happened with comedy, and it evolved out of that because vaudeville eventually died, burlesque eventually died, and up came radio, and then nightclubs would be
a transition.
Would be a transition for anything like that, and so I don't shy away from, you know,
humor.
Controversial humor or humor that people find nasty or disgusting, but I mean, like any comedy, it has to be done well. Like if someone were to come on and do a joke about, I don't know, rape or human trafficking, right? Those are serious subjects that need to be taken serious. But if you craft what you're saying into a way that's gets a point across and is humorous, that's why I like comedy so much.
Sure.
It's a really powerful and progressive almost form of art.
Well, this is actually a good segue into something I was thinking about earlier. And that's, do you think there are any specific topics that, well, obviously you said that comedy shouldn't be censored, and I agree with you. Generally, if you're looking for my general position on something, it's, you know, I would let you say whatever you want, but I should also be allowed to go ahead and tell you you're stupid.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, that's completely fair. I believe.
So, as far for me personally, over the past couple of months, well, over the past couple of years, really, certain issues have begun to, I don't know, have increased weight on me.
Okay.
For example, no, I'm going to give you an example because I'm being a little bit vague right now. A category of jokes I don't find tasteful in any circumstance would be like 9/11 jokes for me. And that's just an example.
Right.
Do you think, you know, and I can extend that a little bit, like so 9/11 jokes, just horrible events, you know.
A lot of people don't like Holocaust
jokes would be one.
Yeah.
You know, just jokes of that nature. Now, how do you feel about those? Do you feel, for me, like I just said, it doesn't matter how good they are. I think, you know, you should be able to say it, but I should be able to, I don't know where I'm getting at with this. Let me just ask you, what are your feelings on jokes like that?
Okay. So, I feel like those jokes, like I said before, with anything, if they're done well, then they're done well.
Sure.
And I'm not gonna say I've never heard a good crafted. I mean, I'm part Jewish, so of my heritage. So you know, I'm not too I don't really like the Holocaust I don't think anyone really likes the Holocaust.
I don't think we have a lot of pro-Holocaust.
I really hope the alt-right and the neo-Nazi party's not listening to this right now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I would hope so.
I would hope so. But yeah, no, you know, but I'm not gonna say I've never heard a good crafted Hitler joke.
Sure.
I just feel, and I've seen this a lot in improv, it's really, really easy to get there and not be able to come back. You know,
absolutely.
So we're gonna go. I'm just gonna use improv as an example because it best shows what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
You know, if we're in a scene and I don't know if we're at like a birthday party. I don't know.
Just as an example.
As an example, we're at a birthday party and the joke's kind of about whatever happening with the clown. Let's say there's a clown at the party and then whoever's playing the clown makes a off-color joke and it gets a laugh, but now let's just say that they portray themselves as an Al-Qaeda member. I don't know, something stupid, something that's not, you know, that's kind of a hard subject to talk about. In improv, you don't have the time to sit back and kind of think, well, what would make this funny and relevant without being offensive? Because, you know, you can, like with stand-up, you have time. You sit there, you lay out your set. You say, you know, you're thinking to yourself what you're going to do, how you're going to do it.
Well, it's pre-planned.
It's pre-planned and it's thought out. improv's off the spot.
Right. Right.
So, in a time and a place where you can sit and think about it, then I think it's really fine. Like, I'll give an example of a time I heard a good, a pretty well thought out 9/11 joke. So,
Okay.
30 Rock, Tina Fey wrote it, and there's an episode where they're having a fireworks spectacular off of Rockefeller Plaza,
Mm-hmm.
and it's mistaken as a terror attack or like an explosion in the city.
Okay.
But the way they set it up in the show
Mm-hmm.
kind of made it seem like it wasn't like it was a really, I don't want to say classy, I don't know how to really put it. It made sense in the context.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure.
And it wasn't just like a knock knock, who's there? Adolf Hitler. Like it wasn't
Sure.
like it was a really thought out, really almost respected in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's in that form, then I actually have a lot of respect for it because it's a subject that you can talk about and still be pungent about it and
Sure.
still be humorous about it without being too negative.
Mhm.
Now, a big one that got backlash recently, probably within the last year or two, was Louis C.K. He went on SNL and made a joke about pedophilia. And that got a huge amount of backlash
Yeah.
from passive viewers.
Sure.
Because obviously SNL is broadcast to the nation,
Mhm.
live, everything like that.
Yep.
And a lot of people were upset about it. But, if you listen to other comedians talk about it, they said you have to listen to the whole set.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not like he just came up and was like, oh, I really like children pedophiles. That's not at all what he was saying. He was saying, about just the way they kind of would see the world and how he was essentially making fun of them. And it was, a lot of people were kind of upset about it, but, me watching it or me listening to other people talk about it, I was just kind of like, it's all about intent, in other words. Comedy's been known to ruffle feathers. It's been known to cause like uproars, but it's all about intent. And it's clear to tell when someone's just being ridiculous or offensive to get attention,
Mhm.
and when someone's being ridiculous and offensive to make a point.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think a good thing to think about would be to use improv as an example again, just because you and I are pretty familiar with it at this point.
Mm-hmm.
If somebody comes along and they, in some numbskull, comes into the scene and they, man, it just kills momentum if they go ahead and bring in some kind of, uncalled for, unprepared joke about something serious. Like the Holocaust.
If it's
or 9/11.
uncalled for, if the scene's not even going towards that, then
Right.
yes. And everyone kind of just stops in their tracks and it's like, okay, because in improv you have to keep building on what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
That's essentially the entire premise of it. So if I'm coming in delivering things about a zoo,
Sure.
right, and I'm kind of building up to, maybe I'm building up to the zoos not being well kept and the animals are going to escape. Right?
Sure.
That's a clear premise. And people can kind of, maybe they can follow along and see that. And if not, then they'll offer something that would be a good conflict.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't really have that, if someone just kind of comes in and is like, oh, these look a lot like the concentration camps. Well, now you have to build off that, and now the person's like you have to kind of work with it.
Oh, it shifts the dynamic.
It really does.
In a way that makes it difficult to return.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. Now, this is kind of a good way to move into just I know we've been hitting on for the past few minutes here on some distasteful comedy, and it kind of pains me to say this, but it's from what I've noticed, and this is coming from somebody who doesn't follow a lot of comedy, is female comedians. I feel like they kind of focus on jokes that deal with things the average person, I would say, wouldn't necessarily want to hear. I'm phrasing this the wrong way, but they use jokes that would be ultra raunchy, I would say. Just explicitly, sexual in their tone, in their material, and it's just I don't know what that is, but it's struggling. It's hard for me to understand how that would be a desirable place to go for comedy when so many more options are available. Do you have a certain take on comedians like that?
What, like women comedians?
Yeah. I'm kind of.
So what we're talking about is women in comedy, right?
Sure.
That's a very big subject, so I'm just wanting to make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
So, first to clarify, you're not saying you don't think women are funny, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
That's what you're saying? Okay.
No. It's just I've noticed a trend, so to speak, with a lot of somehow popular female comedians. Like Amy Schumer is a good example.
Right.
Like her type of comedy is man, it caters to the lowest common denominator, and that's not to say all women comedians are like this. Obviously not.
Okay. A lot of people. It's interesting you bring up Amy Schumer because a lot of people don't like Amy Schumer.
Right.
That seems to be a pretty wide trend, and I don't know. That's very interesting to me because personally, like I said, I admire anyone who can push their way to the top of comedy because it's a very hard ladder to climb, and especially to get your own TV show and have specials and stuff like that. That's a very hard ladder to climb. So of course I applaud Amy Schumer for everything she did, and I'm not directly speaking to Amy Schumer, but I think if you look back at really any comedy, it's always been very hard for women to be taken as seriously in comedy as men. I mean, numerous women laid the path for women in comedy. I mean, you have, like, in radio, you had, like, Gracie Allen. You had the Gracie Allen show, sorry. Phyllis Diller, right? She did a lot of nightclubs and eventually did, when TV came around, did a lot of stuff on TV. And, of course, Joan Rivers, right?
Right, yeah.
So, I think with raunchiness with women came kind of in the 80s. You had like Roseanne Barr and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I don't think it's necessarily raunchy or catering to the lowest denominator. I think comedy in itself is kind of like it's a dirty hobby. And you have like male comedians talk all the time about like having sex.
Whatever. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, you have having sex or
Sure.
their penises, anything like that. So I don't think it's really bad for women. I mean, I don't think anything's bad for anyone or anything like that. But you have kind of this stigma on that about women, about stuff like being too raunchy, anything like that. And me personally, I find it very obsolete because women are funny. Like I can name so many funny women comedians. Some of my favorite are funny women comedians, and I mean,
someone who comes to mind for me, on television would be like somebody like Tina Fey. I think she's pretty good.
I could really just start listening like Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, Tig Notaro. A lot of people don't like Sarah Silverman because of the raunchiness, but I have no problem with Sarah Silverman. I think she's really quick and clever, actually. It's just overall, I honestly, I'm not trying to get sappy or anything. I think it's really harder for women because it's like a male dominated art, and I just can't wait for the day where it's like women in comedy is like such an obsolete topic. Like it's like, what are you talking about? Like, you know what I mean? And I feel like we're really moving towards that. Amy Schumer is probably one of the most well known comedians today.
Whether or not you like her or don't like her.
Whether you like her or not. Same with, I mean, you can think about anyone like Kevin Hart's is probably the most well known comedian right now. He's in so many movies and doing all this stuff. And I'm glad we're having this conversation now. So when you have a reunion episode of this, in 20 years, we go, remember when we had to talk about women in comedy? And it's like, yeah, it's so ridiculous now, you know?
Yeah.
And it's just great. And it's honestly, I admire that it's getting so much recognition now because, I mean, before when you would say, who was a great woman in television, right? You would say Lucille Ball. And maybe people who really thought about it would say Carol Burnett, right? Carol Burnett's great.
Sure, yeah.
Mary Tyler Moore. But now it's like, who's a great woman in comedy? Maya Rudolph, Tina Fey, Amy Poehler, you know? You have all the SNL people, then you just, can go so far from that, and I really enjoy that, and I really like seeing that happening.
Now you mentioned to deviate a little bit. You mentioned SNL.
Oh yeah,
Man, what a stepping stone.
SNL, man.
Yeah, I'd say
history.
now I used to watch it pretty
Okay.
regularly. I don't think it's particularly as good as say it used to be, but I feel like that's a pretty common thing to say.
That's a very common thing to say. Yeah.
Sure, and that may just be fondly remembering the older people.
Rose-tinted glasses kind of thing.
Perhaps,
Right.
but so as far as like a stepping stone for different comedians and stuff,
Yeah.
I feel like SNL's a pretty viable way
Absolutely.
to put your name out there.
Well, let's just look at the history of SNL.
Okay.
Let's really get into this. Okay.
Sure.
So, Saturday Night Live, right, started with it's not yet ready for primetime players. We had John Belushi, Gilbert Radner, Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, and a lot of people that came from there came from Second City, yes, but the National Lampoon. Now, the National Lampoon was a magazine started from Harvard students. It started in Harvard, but moved to a national publishing, and it was the beginning of comedy in the 70s and
Right.
and early 80s and stuff. It was the place to be,
Yeah.
and they started having live stage shows, radio programs, and that's where John Belushi kind of started, and the Murrays, Brian Doyle and Bill, and you just had a lot of people coming through there first. And what happened was Lorne Michaels kind of saw something. Lorne Michaels is the producer and creator of SNL, or often credited as creator of SNL. And from seeing the National Lampoon, he got certain certain cast members.
Sure.
So when SNL started out, it was this phenomenon. No one seen it. Comedy like that was underground. You had Second City and
Skit comedy.
the skit comedy.
Right.
It was it's not at all what it's like today. I mean, you have Key and Peele, Inside Amy Schumer, Portlandia. All these shows kind of came from SNL.
Sure.
Because of the styling. So when SNL came, it was huge. It was like this thing no one's ever seen before. It was underground comedy broadcast live from New York. And
yeah.
And what's amazing with SNL, they just celebrated their 40th. So it's I will always have respect for Saturday Night Live, and Saturday Night Live was probably the first thing I started watching with comedy. I didn't even understand it, and I would watch it coming home, wherever I was doing on Saturday night. This is way younger. I would go to football games with my family, USF football games actually, and we would come home, and it would be late and whatever. My parents would just stick on NBC, and I was like, what is this? And I'd sit and I watch, and of course the jokes went like way over my head.
Sure.
But looking back on it, man, like SNL is an institution. It's a college, and it's so funny to think of it that way, because people even call they call USF alum and stuff like that, and it's such a stepping stone for so many people.
Yeah.
But I've read so many books on Saturday Night Live, and it's a hard place to work.
How so?
Well,
I'm not too familiar with it.
Right.
As far as
okay.
like it as an institution, so to speak.
So Lorne Michaels and Tina Fey's book Bossy Pants. It's a great book. I suggest people reading it. But there's a line that she gives from Lorne Michaels, and it goes, "The show doesn't go on because it's ready. The show goes on because it's 11:30." So there's so much that goes into it, production value and everything, and it's just really admirable, because it's hard work to do that, to have a live show that's it's really, people will say it's not as good as when I was watching it, and you'll get that from anyone. People who watched, I'll talk to my parents and be like, oh, well, no one will ever be good as Chevy Chase on Weekend Update, right, the original. And then you talk to someone a little older, it's like, oh, well, Mike Myers and Dana Carvey as Wayne's World, nothing will ever top that. And then you go talk to someone else, and it's like, oh, well, Celebrity Jeopardy, come on, that's the best. You can't. And then you talk to someone else, and it goes, oh, when Seth Meyers was on Weekend Update and they did the Californians, and then you're gonna talk to someone in 10 years and they'd be like, oh, well, Cicely Strong and Bobby Moynihan and all that. That's never gonna top that, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully for a really long time, because I feel like Saturday Night Live is a really important institution, and it's just a kind of like a rose-colored glasses situation. So.
Well, you can't deny that it's been an important part of moving people up through
Absolutely.
the comedy world and establishing a baseline like Tina Fey.
Right.
It's just there's the first person that comes to mind. I remember her and Jimmy Fallon and all them.
Weekend Update. Yeah.
Weekend Update, and
Oh man, yeah.
it just provides it provides a base for people to go ahead and get their careers in comedy started.
Absolutely, and I would actually have to say that it's very important for that, but
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people think it's the most important, and there's so many people who tried out for SNL who didn't get it. Stephen Colbert, Jim Carrey, Kevin
Mm-hmm.
Hart, Zach Galifianakis, Thomas Middleditch. They all auditioned, and so many people were writers. Conan O'Brien,
Mm-hmm.
Bob Odenkirk. So many people wrote for it, and SNL is just like it's like one of those things. It's an honor to audition because
Sure.
you have to like be chosen. You can just walk in, and with the stepping stones, yeah. I mean, you have like you have all the originals essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then Jimmy Fallon started as like just the guy in the background who could do impressions, and now he's the host of the Tonight Show, another really important institution, which is not as powerful as it once was, I would have to say, but is still a very important part. You have, in comedy, there's just things that are admired. Like,
Sure.
It's almost like a museum. The Tonight Show is one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing boosted anyone's career faster in comedy than getting an okay from Johnny Carson. And he wouldn't even have the comedians we have today if they weren't on the Tonight Show and Johnny asked them to come over and talk to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just the way it was.
So let's actually move on a little bit to talk, late night talk shows.
Late night talk shows, perfect.
With comedians and all that.
Absolutely.
Contemporary ones.
Okay.
So ones happening right now. I'm not a big particular fan of them, and
Do you have a favorite?
if I did like, I don't know, he wouldn't be late night, but I did like the Daily Show before Trevor Noah.
Jon Stewart?
Jon Stewart. I did like Jon
Yeah,
Stewart.
that'd be late night.
Yeah, so I liked his show.
Okay.
I enjoyed his show.
Right.
But from what I'm noticing is, and this could just be them maybe going for the easiest stroke, I guess, but it it gets very very political, I feel like, sometimes. And just give me, yeah.
Oh, you didn't want the Daily Show to go political?
No, okay, so just hang on a second. Let me explain myself.
Okay, yeah.
It just seems to be I don't know, I feel like a lot of it is now serving for political means, and that's on both sides of the spectrum, too.
You mean in general? Like on...
On talk shows, I mean.
Well, yeah, but you mean like in general in terms of all the late night shows? So for example,
Sure.
We had, before that like massive wave of people retiring,
Mm-hmm.
you had Leno,
Mm-hmm.
you had Letterman, you had Stewart,
Sure.
right? And out of all of them, Stewart was like, he was the political one,
Sure.
right? And then now that Colbert took over for Letterman,
Mhm.
obviously Stephen Colbert, he's very political.
Yeah.
So there's another one. I find Jimmy Fallon kind of goes away from politics,
Sure.
but now we have John Oliver with
Who's-
Bill Maher.
Yes.
So now you have
Two
kind of like
very...
very political.
Yeah.
So now instead of having one, or I guess I would argue two
Mm-hmm.
major political networks, you would or outlets, you would have, you have Trevor Noah, Stephen Colbert
Mhm.
on CBS,
Sure.
Bill Maher and John Oliver. Is that what you're trying to get at?
Yeah. So let me just explain.
And Samantha
this.
Bee, excuse me. I forgot
Samantha
about her.
Bee as well. Yeah. Let me explain myself where I'm getting at this. It seems to me that a lot of it is becoming more partisan, which, fine, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems to me there's beginning to be a little bit of a deviation away from comedy for comedy's sake. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Are you kind of... What are your thoughts on this? Let me ask you.
So you mean... Okay, so if I took, for example, James Corden, right? James Corden is after Stephen Colbert,
Okay.
and he's famous for being very, in my opinion, very clickable. Meaning, if you see something on Facebook, it's like carpool karaoke or like the rap battles.
Sure.
Not really hard hitting things. I would say that's fair, but it has adapted with the age of which we're living. TV is completely different.
Oh yeah.
If you didn't watch The Tonight Show that night, you missed it. You didn't see what happened until you waited 10 years and they released a box set or something.
Sure.
If you missed Saturday Night Live, Monday morning someone would say, oh, you missed this great scene with Chevy Chase and John Belushi. Now what we have is, did you watch Jimmy Fallon last night? No. They had this great thing when him and Kevin Hart did a dance battle or something, and you could easily just go on YouTube and find it.
Sure.
And that's kind of, I think the comedy world is kind of appealing to that, where it's like
maybe the
easy shareable.
Sure, that's right.
Yes,
that's a good way to put it.
I is always the joke that's like, James Corden, you could share that anything he does, like with your mom. Like, Mom, look, Michelle Obama's singing in a car with this British man, and it's like that was late night television. That came out at like 12:30.
Yeah,
it's a lot different now because I don't necessarily know if it's a bad or good thing, but censorships are kind of depleting, and you can start saying more on TV, and it's just so funny because you listen to all these stories about comedy, and it would be like, you couldn't say pregnant on like the Dick Van Dyke Show.
Sure.
Now you have like, the boundaries has been pushed so far. They would censor the Smothers Brothers so much, all the writing would be changed, and so with late night, it was kind of like this outlet where it was like, you could say so much more.
Sure.
And now it's like, because you can say so much more on so many different levels, it's more about, well, what can you say for people to be listening, to be watching? So I feel like that's kind of what we're living in now.
Do you feel like shock value extends too far, almost?
I feel like it's kind of like for example, if because I'll look at like who's coming on late night.
Sure.
I follow them on social media and stuff, and they'll be like, tonight we have this person, this person, this person. If I'm going through it and I see, tonight we have Kevin Hart, I know instantly they're going to be doing something ridiculous to get views.
Sure.
If I'm going through it and it says, tonight we have Helen Mirren, then I'd be like, oh, they might do something. Like, tonight we have director Damien Chazelle. I'm like, they're not going to do anything with him.
Right.
It's just appealing to the masses. If you have Ryan Gosling on a show, you're not just going to do nothing. You're going to try to be like, hey, can we do this? Can we do that? And who really kind of started that, I feel, would be Jimmy Fallon, because Jimmy Fallon kind of did all these games and these really fun things when he was late night, not the Tonight Show.
Sure.
And it's just kind of interesting because I would almost say he kind of started it all. I mean, you can obviously go back to Johnny Carson, where he had, he would do like magic tricks and stuff. And I mean, Johnny Carson, right? He's considered the king of late night, and rightfully so, honestly. And no one could really interview someone like Johnny and stuff like that. And so I would say safe would be a pretty good word for it, just based on how everything's kind of molded. And personal branding, honestly. I mean, Jimmy Fallon got a lot of heat when he interviewed like Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton for being like too easy, but that's like his brand. I mean, he's branded as kind of like a nice guy, and Same with James Corden.
Maybe non-confrontational.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's just kind of like their outlook. I mean, a lot of people make fun of Jimmy Fallon because he laughs at like everyone's jokes. He loves everyone's movies, everyone's TV shows, but that's just his job.
Mm-hmm.
He has to be like that.
Sure.
And I don't know.
So what about do you feel like at some point the quality of comedy goes down due to so just to back up for a second, I personally feel that there is a lot of just shock value kind of, I'd call it cheap. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but stuff like Amy Schumer that she would put out. We don't have to get into the content, but anybody who knows Amy Schumer knows that she's pretty off the rails. And a lot of it's just for shock value. So my question to you is, do you feel there's at some point where the quality of comedy goes down just when people are looking for the most heinous things to say?
I think if someone's deliberately going out and just like shouting and then like with no content, yeah, that's not funny. And like they know it's not funny and people watching it know it's not funny. But then again, I'm going to take that exact example I just said. So someone going out and shouting, right? That's not funny and everyone knows it's not funny. But Billy Eichner, he's the host of Billy on the Street, one of my personal favorites. If people listening haven't seen his show, please look it up. Billy on the Street, it's great. But he is kind of poking fun at pop culture, though he is in pop culture. And he does a lot of like outlandish obstacle courses, crazy questions. It's like a game show kind of model, and it's hilarious. It's honestly, I think, one of the funniest shows on TV and one of the quickest and wittiest. And it's such a simple concept with outlandish results. And so when we talk about Amy Schumer, I don't mind Amy Schumer because I mean she delivers. Inside Amy Schumer is a good show. Like I'm not gonna sit here and bash it or say anything negative about it. And it's good. It's pretty well written. So when we talk about shock value, I feel like it's almost just outdated because shock value it's just too hard to do now. I mean, you have great comedians that people admire. Personally, Sam Kinison, right? He was a great comedian, very loud, very obnoxious. The Dice Man, Andrew Dice Clay, right? He would sit there and do his super offensive misogynist words, but it was an act, like it was a joke. And when we look at shock value, it's just not as needed anymore. I mean, anything can get like retweets and stuff. Like sure. I get when people do shock value because it's like we got to get it going, got to get the motor running. But nothing ever, no force ever will take away good comedy over shock value. Like good comedy will always be better than shock value, and it'll always be admired more. You're never gonna see someone just like who's just like a loud person win the Mark Twain Award for comedy. They're not gonna win a Peabody. Their good comedy is irreplaceable. Nothing will beat that.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and just end it with you've talked to me a little bit about wanting to go into comedy.
Right.
Do you want to expand on that?
Well, I guess we could probably tell your viewers what we have in mind.
Yeah. Well, okay. So Adam and I are planning on doing a podcast with another friend of ours, separate from this one, and have that be kind of a half sketch, half improv kind of comedy podcast.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
That's fair to say. And I would like to stress that this is a very serious podcast. This podcast is very comedy oriented. As in, this is talking about comedy, but this will be comedy.
Right.
I know we weren't the funniest people right now because we were talking about serious things.
Sure.
But this kind of takes on the feel of a whole mesh of comedy, honestly, and it's because we're all three guys who like comedy, so we all have different people we admire. So we're all bringing like a different flair to it. We have a couple of things down. It's gonna be mostly semi scripted, meaning that we'll have a layout, but it's gonna be almost all improv actually. But I mean, do you want to talk about some of your favorite comedians, and I can talk about mine, and then that'd be a good way to close it down.
Yeah, it sounds good. As far as as somebody who doesn't pay intricate amounts of attention to comedy, people that I enjoy would be Mitch Hedberg. He passed away a little while ago. He was good. I enjoyed his comedy. And
my senior quotes from Mitch Hedberg.
Yeah.
In my yearbook.
Yeah.
Because I'm tired of following my dreams. I'm just gonna ask where they're going and hook up with them later.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you. He was decent. He was pretty decent.
Oh yeah.
So I enjoy his comedy. I actually kind of have a preference for. I think it's more difficult to do now more than ever. But I do enjoy and appreciate comedy that's clean, so to speak. Because I feel like a lot of the times, especially in today's day and age, so to speak, they a lot of comedians will just they'll go down to more raunchy stuff, which we don't have to hit on again, obviously. But so I do appreciate any clean comedian.
That seemed to be the general kind of motif of the interview. The kind of
how it's separating good from bad comedy.
I admire that. I don't mind that at all.
But yeah, no. So as far as where I lean, I really don't know many comedians. To be absolutely honest, some of the comedians you mentioned I've never heard of before.
Really? Well, that's good. Maybe you could.
Yeah, maybe I can check them out. But I tell you, I do appreciate some of the comedians that try to stay clean. So anybody like that. But I most of all, I think Mitch Hedberg is probably my favorite comedian.
Yeah, he's a good one.
So what about yours?
Oh man, there's a lot actually. I could just
add on another hour.
Do you want me to just rattle on? I could just sit here and rattle them on.
I'll tell you what, let's limit it to 5.
To
Who's your
top 5 comedians?
Top 5 comedians. Sounds
okay. In order, no particular order.
No particular.
Okay, great, because that would be really hard.
Sure.
We're gonna exclude the ones that are everyone's favorites. Like
sure.
George Carlin.
Okay.
And like Richard Pryor, all them.
Mm-hmm.
They're excluded.
Out of the picture.
That's a given.
Sure.
Okay, so Mel Brooks.
Okay.
Great comedian across all boards. He's won like every single award. He's amazing. Don Rickles, great. Really shows how you can be insulting yet respective kind of thing. So there's them. Bill Murray is amazing.
Bill Murray's pretty good.
Bill Murray's
from what I've
so
seen.
good because he's good at just riffing off but also taking people in and everything like that. John Mulaney and Mike Birbiglia. I'm gonna count them as one because they're tied.
Sure.
But and then Bill Eichner.
Yeah.
Bill Eichner and I can keep going. Thomas Middleditch, Ben Schwartz, all of them. But yeah. We'll probably do a second episode about this. There's a lot to talk about in comedy, honestly.
Oh yeah, for sure. This was We can call this an introduction, so to speak.
Part 1.
Comedy part 1. That's what the title will be.
Or the state of comedy today.
Something like that. Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Well, thank you for interviewing me and.
Oh, totally.
Yeah, and you can pay me under the table. We don't have to do any long business forms.
No, I don't. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. I'm not going to put this on my taxes.
Okay, great.
I just want to make that explicitly clear.
Okay, great.
So, thanks for being on, Adam. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you made it this far, I appreciate it a lot. Man, this is a long one. We're hitting on almost 59 minutes here. So, everybody, I hope you have a good day, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks, guys.